right, I think we're live. Let me, yeah, all right, you guys saw me messing around with my Discord windows for a while here. Sorry about that. I uh I upgraded OBS and it changed the way that scene transitions work or something. And so I used to have to explicitly do a scene transition, and now I don't. As you can tell, I don't know how any of this crap works. I did, however, for once in my whole life, successfully um, start on the right stream. The last couple times we've had to direct everybody to like a different video. Um, yeah, so that's exciting. I'm proud of myself. Pat on the back here. Um, so right now it is just me. Um, there might be other members of the core team arriving, and so I'll switch over to the Discord view where we can chat with them. But given that it's just me, it may be a little bit of a shorter event. Kind of depends on the questions that people have. Yeah. All right. So, I'm just going to dive in and answer this question. We can do maybe updates a little bit later to, see if anybody else from the team arrives. Hey, Scott. Hey, Mike. Thanks for dropping in. So what we're going to start with, yeah, we've got one question here. This is the only question that I currently know of, right? So this might only be if nobody else asks any questions, this might be like a 20-minute thing. But let me move this my chat window here a little bit so I'm actually looking at the camera. It's a little bit better. All right. So Mike says, "Hi, I can't make it to live to the office hours, but I was wondering if you had any examples on how to do role-based policy checks when the user has different roles depending on the tenant. Wasn't sure how to set up the policies as I couldn't figure out how to access the tenant ID. I can only seem to get the actor ID." Okay, so I have two answers for you. The first piece on doing that is typically like when you set the actor. We've done this in real applications. So when you set the actor up front, you have a calculation or a field on it where you put the active roles, like the roles for the current tenant. Because typically, like 99% of the time in multi-tenant applications, you know what the tenant is alongside with the actor, like up front, right? So you set you have a calculation that just loads the roles for the current tenant, and then you can then you have that on the actor, so you can reference the actor like you would any other thing, like actor.current role, that sort of thing. The other thing is, and I don't think you really need this to do what you want to do, but we did just add, and I believe it's released now, a tenant filter template, which, how you can say like actor and then a field, or you can say arg and then a field. There's a zero argument one that's just tenant, so that's like the current tenant. So that is how, in some scenarios you might want to leverage that, but I think realistically the best way is to just make sure that the user, when you load them in like a plug somewhere, you attach the roles for the current tenant. That's the best way to do it. So cool. Okay, Scott Bennett wants to okay, we can dive into polymorphic relationships in forms. I mean, hey, look, you've got the floor, my man. There's only 8 people here. I thought there'd be more. Our viewership of this event has been going up. Let me polish these bad boys. Has been going up. But yeah, not so many people here. So yeah, I mean, shoot, if you've got crazy wacky questions about polymorphic relationships in forms, this may not be the best forum for it, since like you probably are going to want to show code or something like that. But if you've got questions, I can answer them. Cool. Yeah, I'm glad that helps, Mike. We do. I mean, I guess, since we've got a lot of space for chit chat here, we do eventually want to support some interesting and novel features at the policy layer. Specifically, you might call it lazy actor loading, where the actor can be just a struct with a primary key, um, or a value or something like that. And then, I mean, in this, for lazy actor loading, it would have to be a resource. But the concept is that as you use the actor, like as you know, when you use it with a policy that needs some additional information, we would load stuff on demand. And what that would let you do is not actually fetch the entire user. Now, this only mostly makes sense for API pipelines, not as much for like your live view setups. But what it would do is it would just load the minimum amount of stuff on demand necessary to complete any given request, which I think is a pretty neat concept. Okay, we do have James Harton who has joined us. I'm going to switch over to the Discord view. His face is going to be real big because mine is in the corner. Actually, I'll leave myself as a blank box now that I think about it, because that's just a little bit more friendly. All right, let me switch us over. I think we have Discord and audio. All right. Oh, actually, I can just show my own camera.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Also, this is my dog, Hugh. He has to be in every meeting that I go in. It's just how it is.
That is quite important. Ash office
Yeah,
hours.
he crashes every single meeting.
Good dog. All right.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure that people can hear you actually. So if we get a sound check here, can somebody can somebody chime in with there we go.
Hello. Check.
This is an audience participation exercise. We're relying on you folks. Can anybody hear James?
Okay, buddy. Off you go. Good boy.
I'm pretty sure they can. Yeah, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Great news.
Cool.
Cool. So let's see what Mike says. Did have a quick question that I'll watch on replay. The GraphQL subscriptions DSL is listed currently in beta on the docs. Are there any plans on when that will be out of beta? That is actually out of date. It is not in beta anymore. It is just kind of in a state. I think I mentioned this to you in Discord, but it's kind of in a state where not that many people have used it. And you know, there's a lot of different.
Not very mature.
Yeah, exactly. A little not very mature. There's a lot of different ways you can do liveness when you're building Elixir applications, and so it's one of those things where like some people want to use GraphQL subscriptions, and some people don't use RDSL; they just use regular GraphQL subscriptions, and some people use Phoenix channels and whatever. So I think it's one of those things where like, you know, it's a subsection of a subsection of a subsection of people who want to use that. So I wouldn't consider it in beta. We'll support it. We'll fix any issues that you find, but I would consider just that, like, you know, there's going to be a slight pioneer tax on its usage. All right. Scott says, I've got an argument to my create action of type union. I'm assuming when I submit the form, I'll need to do something to turn that argument into a managed relationship somehow. Yeah. So this is actually kind of an interesting thing. Like, unions are supported in ashphoenix.form, and you can make an input type that is a union. I would actually want to see kind of how it plays out. So I can tell you how to do what you want to do. However, there isn't really a concept in ashphoenix.form for like a managed relationship union right now. So I cannot really guarantee your mileage on this one. Like what you may want to do instead is have a union of input types, like maps, that where it's like, you know, but even then you're not going to get the same validation. So we may have to kind of spike it out. Like you may also want to roll your own. So let's go through the options real quick. You can, given a union, you can write a custom change that will grab the union, and then depending on the type, you'll call manually, not using in the action, not saying change manage relationship, but manually in a change, you'll say ash.changeset.manage relationship, and you'll manage the appropriate relationship depending on what type of thing it is that you got. So that's one way. I'm going to skip the union of input types because you just don't want it. The other way, I think, is to roll your own. And so for this, what you would do is you would have a form you would have like an inputs for each type of thing. And when you start, you would add like the default type. You would use ashfinitysoftform.add form to add the default type. And then you'd have maybe like a drop down that says like change type. And when you change the type, that's a custom handler in your live view that will remove that other form.
Yep.
And will add a form of the other type. So to the user, it looks like one form is, changing as you go. Yeah, this is, scrap the union input argument. This is definitely the better way to do it. And then you also get like a really like, it maps to the underlying relationship being managed, meaning you get like a bunch of like pre-validations of the right actions and all that sort of stuff. So, and we can maybe talk that through in the concrete if you try that and run into any issues. But that is how I would suggest doing like a union relationship with managed relationship in Ash Phoenix software. Alrighty. So we don't have any active questions now yet. You guys got to keep them coming in, otherwise the meeting ends. But I didn't do the sort of little update from the team yet because it was just me. So I thought maybe James, do you want to kick us off and just kind of talk about what you've been up to this last month? Go for it.
Man, I've mostly been up to project work for clients. What I've been up to, been working on a get step type for Ash Reactor so that you can say, I just want to get a thing by an identity and it'll do it. What else have I been working on? Can't even think.
Bro,
this
you released a
so
whole
much.
extension since the last Ash office hours happened.
Did I?
Yeah. What did?
Really?
Yeah. I don't think we had.
I thought it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair. Ash Ops is new. Yeah, I did that. I did that on the secret because I wanted it to be a little sort of surprise present for Zach. Not that it was his birthday or anything, but.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen Ash Ops, you should definitely check it out. It's really useful. I mean, it's honestly just on the axis of tools that are like easy to set up and useful. It's very high on both, and yeah, it's really quite nice.
So we should probably explain a little bit about what it does. It is much like a code interface or GraphQL or JSON API. It is a interface to your actions, except it exposes them as mixed tasks so that you can run mix myapp.accounts.list users and it will call the list users, or call the, however you set it up, call the read action on your users resource and spit them out as YAML or JSON. But that's like the most basic case. It has a whole lot more features in there, like generic actions, create, prompting for input from on the standard input, or taking YAML or JSON as input and using that to modify the records or whatever. So it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, definitely powerful. Okay, what have I been working on? A lot. You know what I remembered? That this is a new thing we can do, which is we can go through the last 4 Ash weekly issues.
Yeah.
And see what they say. We'll go through them in ascending order. Well, yeah, let's talk about the highlights. I'm not going to go through everything. Like, you know what? I remember we talked about the improved sorting syntax in the last one, I believe. So let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Igniter gets smarter. What did we talk about for Igniter getting smarter? Oh yeah, it checks for a new version of itself, because we had so many bug reports that ended in, can you please update Igniter? So that's nice. Upcoming events, by the way, we have AlchemyConf. There's a training there. That's the only currently scheduled Europe training. Probably is going to be the only Europe training this year. We have Gig City Elixir coming up as well. which we're also doing a training for, and the tickets are cheaper than they've ever been anywhere else. They're $195. It's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So if you're on the East Coast or you want to fly there, snag a ticket. We think they're going to go pretty quickly because we know there's a lot of interest in this one. And ElixirConf EU. There's not a training there, but I'll be there, and Josh will be there as well. Yeah, those are the major ones that are sort of coming up around the bend. All right, let's see what we got. Issue number 8. Oh yeah, that's the Ash Ops announcement. In that same announcement, James also did another great thing, which he did a mermaid extension or a mermaid chart generator for reactors. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I mean, it was a bit of a letdown, I think, because it actually, it generates mermaid graphs for your reactors, but often reactors are so complicated that the automatic layout of mermaid graphs is actually kind of confusing. Like, it confused me more than just looking at the code. So I'm not sure if it was a net win, but the feature's there and you can use it if you need to.
Yeah, I've been actually thinking a lot about that because we have some mermaid chart generators, and primarily the thing is that mermaid's just a really easy target for generating stuff like that. But I'm wondering if maybe there's a tool that can translate mermaid to something else that's like maybe more interactive, like open up a mermaid chart, be able to sort of drag things around, or if we should consider as a framework in general targeting something else, like generating
like dot.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just one of those things. It's a big lift, whereas mermaid is quite easy. Which is kind of the point, right? Like, the point of mermaid is it's really easy to write the format. But yeah. Okay, moving on. Yeah, so we have teased Ash AI a little bit here and there. That is actually moving a little bit quicker than I expected. Things kind of clarified, and the package itself is, I mean, we already have like external contributors, people are using it. There's still a lot to do on that front, but a release is probably coming in the near-ish future. Not the next couple weeks, but maybe soon after the next couple weeks. So yeah, keep your eyes and ears out for that one. And then we had one just the other day, number 10, Gig City Elixir training. Talked about that. This is a fun one. There's a new example app called Tololo or Tololo that was posted on the Elixir forum by, I believe, a group of students who wanted to build effectively a sort of non-trivial, real life significant application. Okay, it wasn't necessarily students, I'm not sure, but they did say it was a summer project for them to learn more about Ash and try to build something as professionally as they could. And it's a quite ambitious application. It's got a lot of great little example code. I have not read every line of code in that app. I can't guarantee that like all of it is perfect idiomatic code, but that kind of thing is pretty important. Like to be able to see real life ambitious stuff, open source, is a really big win. So yeah, that's fun. You should check it out if you're interested. All right, I skipped a bunch of small stuff because honestly, so much happens every week that if I listed out all of the minor updates and improvements, we would be here for a very long time. Yeah. And aside from that, what else have I been working? Oh, okay. There's two main things. I've mentioned Ash AI, and the feature set, like the initial feature set, is clarifying around what we're sort of planning for the first release. It's essentially 3 main features, which is structured outputs. Quite easy to do. It's really nice. You define a generic action and you give it a return type, and then you give it a prompt effectively. And then it uses structured outputs to make sure that you get data in that type. It has some nice benefits over something like Instructor, which is that you can use discrete types. Like you can say like this is an atom, or you can say it returns like a string that matches a regex. But the other big thing is that because they're modeled as actions, they dovetail really nicely into the next thing, which is tool calls. So you have the ability to, just like Ash Ops lets you define actions that say are available as mixed tasks, and Ash GraphQL lets you define actions that are available as GraphQL endpoints. Ash AI lets you say that these actions are available as these tool calls. And then when you're working with an LLM assistant, you can say, here's, use these tools, and it can sort of operate your application. You call those actions for you. And so by having a generic action, this is what I was mentioning earlier, a generic action with structured outputs, you can actually chain and compose multi-LLM workflows. So you can have like a simple LLM that is cheap running locally that's designed to do sentiment analysis, and you can have like a more expensive GPT-4o assistant workflow that's actually selecting the tools, and you don't have to do anything special. You just say what tools it has available by name, or you can even say tools true to just give it everything, which we probably get worse results if you do that, if you just give it the whole kitchen sink. But it's very powerful, very useful, and it again leverages everything we've already been building with Ash. Actions are well typed, actions are usable in all sorts of things. And so what it means is, say you have your generic action that does a sentiment analysis of some piece of text. If you want to make a GraphQL endpoint that returns that sentiment analysis as a service or as a tool for your front end or whatever, it's one line of code. So you're not like throwing a bunch of stuff kind of away, and adopting some new tools boilerplate and setup for how you are doing tool calls or anything like that. It's all very Ash native, which makes it much more powerful. And the third feature is vectorization, which is as your data models change, we will refetch embeddings for the changing fields, and then we'll save those in the resource. So that's the main feature set, and that powers vector searches, which is very useful when combined with assistance and RAG and that sort of thing. I could see a case for moving that into its own thing, but because typically your vector searches are you going to be using services and tools that are like LLM AI tools, there's enough crossover that I think it makes sense to combine them. Yeah, and the other thing that I'm working on is union queries in Ash. So, if you're familiar with SQL, you can say, select star from whatever union, select star from something else, and that sort of thing. And we're not aiming to make this like you can do every kind of union you can dream up. But there are a lot of cases where unions will either perform better than like a big query with ors in it. But there are also cases where you cannot easily model problems without a union. So a good example is if you wanted to get the first inserted thing and the last inserted thing in one action, right? That's actually, you can do it. There's just same with SQL, with any other thing. There's a lot of different ways you can get clever about it, right? You can say where the inserted add is greater than the max inserted add of all the other inserted adds, and where where it's less, equal to the min, right? And so you can get your two results, right? But that's kind of pathological and it's not going to perform well. So ash.query.union of is a way to say that this query is actually a union of these, smaller sort of, we don't call them subqueries because that's a SQL term and we don't want to make it more confusing. We just call them unions. But each one of those unions can have its own filters and sorts and limits and offsets. And I'm going to add to that at some point a tool for remapping field values using calculations, which is another thing you might need. Like each union might have a match score that is dependent on some like if you're doing like a search, you often have like, union the things where it matches here, and then on this one you union where it matches this way, and they have a differently computed match score, and you need to see the match score that put it in the result set. So we still have some work to do there, still some modeling work to do even, right? But I have a proof of concept working with the ETS data layer and with Postgres. So that's good news. I think that'll help. It'll help with people needing to optimize their queries, and it'll help write a certain kind of action, I think, in a really expressive way. All right. That's all for the updates, unless you have anything else, James.
Nope.
Okay. Well, no more questions came in, so we might, we'll hit here. We'll hang out here and shoot the breeze for a few minutes. But if we don't get questions, I'm not going to sit here looking at you guys like a dummy. So
I see a question about the timeline for Ash 4.
Oh, sorry. I guess I don't know how to look up in the chat history. Sorry. Um, so the timeline for Ash 4, look, honestly, it's like pretty vague. I'm
Yeah.
I'm anticipating that it will happen this year, just based on the amount of things that are stacking up, that are backwards compatibility things, and there are quite a few things tagged as Ash 4 work. Um, the Ash 4 upgrade is going to take longer for me, like for our team, than the Ash 3 upgrade did.
Mm.
The Ash 3 upgrade put a lot of
Mm.
work on end users. But now that we have Igniter, it's going to come with a full suite of, maybe it might be one task, or it might be like broken up depending on how we sort of want to model it. But it's going to come with a bunch of tools to apply as many as possible. I cannot guarantee we're going to be able to just magically upgrade everything, but to apply as many as possible of these fixes or breaking changes, mitigations, or whatever, automatically. And so that means it's going to be more work on us to actually produce that release.
And test them in a bunch of scenarios too.
Yep, exactly. So it's a lot more work. I do think that, in a way, this is almost like, this is what the Ash 3 upgrade should have been like. We just didn't have Igniter at the time. It wasn't an option even. And this is what major upgrades will look like, going forward. So it's possible that major upgrades will happen faster in the future. But what remains to be seen. So given that it's going to take more time, like, I'm going to have more time in like July, August, September, where with like fewer conferences and other things like that. At least I anticipate having a little bit more time. So that might be a good.
We'll fill it up. Don't worry.
Yeah, we find something for it, don't we? But yeah, that's kind of, it's very vague, but that's where we're going. Okay, so let's see. We have two more questions. What is the vision for Ash 4? And I'm going to skip to the next one real quick, because that's, I think, maybe a quicker question. What are your thoughts about changing the default value for allow nil from true to false in Ash 4? I will open an issue about that later. Just wanted to see the live reaction to that idea.
Is that for attributes? Is that for arguments?
Yeah. I don't know if I can, like, okay, what I will say is, like, we can talk about it. It's not like an immediate no. It is a question about if the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak. Because while we can write an upgrader that automatically flips everybody's stuff in their applications, there's a lot of extensions that add stuff to resources that also then have to manually be gone through and changed. So it kind of comes down to an essential issue of there is a default value, and when you're making an attribute, one of the first things, or an argument, one of the first things that you have to decide is, like, is this required or not required? And if you've been using Ash for any even small period of time, you eventually learn what that default is. And so I don't know if it's like worth changing everybody's brains about it, just to help in that first like couple days when you don't know that you have that, when you aren't aware that allow nil is not, or allow nil false, sorry, allow nil true is the default. So we can have a conversation about it though. We'll come to the table, and I'm open to it. But my current gut instinct is that I would not want to do that, just for the other flow on negative effects of like everybody having to rewire their brains. Let's see.
So, what is your vision for Ash 4?
There's no real vision for it, honestly.
Yeah.
We just have a bunch of improvements that are queued up waiting on Ash 4. So if you want to know, like, go look. There's an Ash 4. There's an Ash 4 milestone in in the repo. And there's also, if you look at the backwards compatibility guide, you can see a bunch of things that are going to be the default in Ash 4 that like you can opt into now. But the truth is, I don't think there's really any grand plan or scheme for Ash 4 in terms of like we want to make it. I don't know, like Ash 3 was all about like a certain kind of developer experience, and we did focus a lot on that. Igniter focused on getting started. We've done complete documentation overhaul, all this other stuff. But so Pictum says to ignore him. I upgraded and I think I'm noticing errors now, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be ignoring. So I guess that makes it easy to ignore.
Woo. There's some stuff that we've talked about in terms of Ash 4, but not that we've ever actually agreed on. Like, there's some things that we've talked about, for example, being able to package up a group of resources or a domain or whatever as a hex package and ship it to a user, that sort of thing. And I think that wouldn't happen until sometime after that had gone through. But I can't think of anything specific from my angle as mostly as an Ash extension author that we need in terms of the vision for Ash 4. It feels kind of like, and I know Zach keeps adding features, but it feels kind of feature complete, in terms of the low hanging fruit.
Yeah, I do think it's mostly shaped right. And a lot of what we're doing now is like extending, like just making life easier and, removing the cases where you have to do custom stuff and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I can tell you something that's kind of on the books for Ash 5. I know I'm not going to do it now. But in Ash 5, probably, or just call that, distant future next year type stuff.
4.x.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to support dynamic resources. Is one, I don't know if that's what we'll call them. But essentially it's the ability to define a resource that does not live in a module, but instead it's like a data structure, purely a data structure. That you could like store in a database, for example. And so the concept there is we would have a protocol that can take some value and turn it into an Ash.resource data structure or something along those lines. And this would essentially allow you to do certain kinds of things like custom fields for each customer has custom fields for their thing. You can actually construct an Ash.resource with like a create action that will like validate all those custom fields and store it in your database. And it empowers like a certain kind of like, I don't know, if you wanted to build like a no code type tooling, you could do it pretty easily that way. And the nice thing about it is like it would inherit all of the nice fancy stuff we have for Ash resources, like all of the crazy tooling and that sort of thing. It would be limited in terms of what extensions support it. Like extensions would have to explicitly support that kind of resource, so it would start quite limited. And those resources wouldn't have associated structs, which means you'd be always dealing with like just a map of the data that came back for that resource, etc. It is a huge effort, to be honest, but it is doable if we apply enough elbow grease. So that is something that's on the long distant roadmap that would be relatively transformative for the Ash feature set.
I see a question here about passkeys. I would love that. Please do investigate. Send me a PR. I'd be very happy to review it.
Yep. I think another answer to that question is passkeys will come to Ash authentication by our team when we have a customer that needs passkeys.
Yeah.
We want it really bad. But we have like, you kind of have to balance building something that's like relatively significant, like for that you don't need at all. Like it's hard to actually vet the implementation. It's hard to, there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't really happen. And so a lot of times those bigger components really only come when somebody from the community contributes them, or when we have like a paying customer somewhere. Not Ash, we Alembic, the company that we work at, has a paying customer, and it's like, hey, we need passkeys. That's part of the spec for this thing we're building, and then we certainly would not hand roll them passkeys and not put it in Ash authentication, unless it was like some contract requirement. But generally speaking, we would put it. That's what we do. We build it into Ash tooling. So, yeah, that's when it would happen. All right, folks.
Also, if you wanted to pay us to write it, we could do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Alembic has a lot of people, not a lot available right now, but actually, we have people available. So if you really wanted passkeys for your app, hit us up.
Yeah.
I mean, I would prefer it if somebody makes a PR, right? Like, I don't mind. We love getting paid to do stuff, but we also love it when the community chips in, and we've had big stuff like this, contributed in the past. So
yeah, like the great folks who contributed all the GetText infrastructure for Ash Authentication Phoenix so that people can add translations, and now you can log in Swedish. I don't know that there are any other languages other than English and Swedish in there, but the infrastructure's now there to do it.
Yeah, that's a good example. And I think like the Apple sign-in strategy was contributed by somebody else, and some other stuff like that. So, I mean, we get a lot of PRs actually. It's kind of crazy when I think about, like, I'm pretty sure I'm going through like 2 to 3 PRs a day, across all of our various packages. We're very friendly to contributors. You don't have to get it right the first time, and we're also kind of not sticklers about like our issues list. Like, if you want to start a discussion, you can open an issue to say, let's start a discussion on, how we might do this thing. We prefer that stuff in the issues list. I know a lot of other people want to have like a separate place for discussion and a separate place for issues, but we've found like discussions turn into real work that we want people to be able to find. And, so it's like, yeah, you can open an issue that's like, can we have this thing? And the issue might just stay open until somebody makes a PR.
Yeah.
No more questions? I'm going to give it like 2 minutes of airtime before we call it. And the only reason I'm giving it 2 minutes is because YouTube has the worst lag on my chat. It's so ridiculous. Oh, there is one thing. Someone said that maybe we can chat through my issue with polymorphic relationships in forms afterward in the Discord. And yeah, of course, hit me up. I'm sure, I know that it's something you can do. I cannot guarantee that it's like a one-liner Ash Phoenix.form feature.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help.
Maybe it doesn't have the best DX, but it'll do. It'll do it.
Yep. Oh, here's a good one.
Here we
go. So I'm very, very excited about the type system in Elixir. And one thing that people may have noticed is there's a lot of, the metaprogramming that produces resources and stuff like that does not produce dialyzer type specs or anything like that. And the primary reason for that is because what's that?
The ones I've written do.
Well, what I mean is, no, we have dialyzer type specs for our code. I mean, when we produce the resource structs and the code interface functions. We don't generate.
The code interface ones, I think, do have type specs. I'm pretty sure they do.
They can't. We don't have an Ash type to type spec function.
Oh, okay, maybe we don't.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
I think probably what you think of is the introspection functions for DSLs and stuff like that. Those generated functions do have type specs. Yeah. So, but a part of the reason for that is because I know that the type system is coming up, and I've had conversations with Jose about it specifically because I wanted to make sure that in the same way that you can metaprogram to produce a dialyzer type spec, you can metaprogram to produce an Elixir type spec, and you can. He has confirmed that. And so what that means is, as soon as we have the ability to actually write types for our code. Right now, it doesn't make any difference for us because it's just basically every release that comes out with better stricter type checking just gets that much better because you get warnings about stuff you're doing wrong. But when we have strong typing as opposed to the sort of weak typing that you get from inference, we're going to generate for as much as we possibly can, everywhere that it could possibly make sense. We're going to generate from your types to generate things like typed structs and to generate things like your code interfaces will all be typed, all that sort of stuff. And if I can figure out how to do it, I don't think it'll work, but I'm going to try. I also want to find a way to make a typed ash.change set where even when you're working in the abstract, it is typed, like you get like a custom, myapp.change set or myapp.query or something like that, that knows the sets of actions, and then for each action, the sets of inputs and all that sort of stuff. That's gonna be way later. But I guess my point is I'm very passionate about the type system, very excited about it, and I think in fact for those using Ash, you're going to be able to leverage the type system like very quickly and to a very significant degree. You will not have to rewrite any of your code to do it. So I think that's kind of another sales pitch. This is what we talk about this a lot with Ash. It's like, you don't have to like reinvent any of these wheels, or, when something new comes out, you just get it for free, and that's going to happen with the type system. So, yeah, that's how they will interact.
Short answer, nicely.
Mm-hmm. I'm so excited. I'm seriously like the moment that there's a release candidate out that includes the ability to write types, I'm dropping everything that I'm doing, and I'm getting to it.
Yeah, I'll be right there with you, brother.
Awesome. It's so exciting.
I didn't add a type system to Reactor because I didn't want to have Reactor depend on Ash, because it should, like, the idea was that it be used independently if possible. But it would be great to be able to do, leverage Elixir's typing to actually type your whole graph as it goes.
Yeah.
Give you proper warnings, that sort of thing.
Yep. Yeah, we should still kind of figure out. This is kind of a fresh idea. Well, we've talked about this particular thing, but I'm wondering if Reactor can have like a stub of a type system with adapters for, like, you give it like a you say like this is typed with ash.type or something like that, and then when you put in inputs, you can type them, and it's going to say, well, like, what, it's going to have a mapping of like Reactor's cast, and because you need way less stuff than Ash type needs. So if you were to do that, we could have that sort of inversion, and when you use the ash.reactor extension, it could automatically get the Ash type stub for that behavior.
Well, we definitely need something, because, like, as probably the most prolific Reactor extension writer, I have found myself writing steps over and over again that actually, like, use nimble options all the time to specify not just the options but also the arguments that come into steps. And I'm like, I'm repeating this over and over and over again. I need a better solution to this.
Yeah.
So I'm keen if anyone has any suggested abstractions for dealing with that. But also nimble options, we're kind of, but especially with Spark, we've pushed it pretty much as far as we can push it. And I feel like it's getting pretty leaky in terms of abstractions. So, like, do we look at something like Norm? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there.
I mean, what's wrong? I mean, you're talking about Spark.options. What's wrong with Spark.options? Like, it, I don't know. It's pretty, kind of does everything.
The way it works with custom types, like, the problem with nimble options in general, and the way it works with custom types is, like, that's why we had to vendor it into Spark.options, was because of all the the custom types, and we wanted to do, type spec generation for them and stuff.
Well,
so it makes it hard to,
we vendored it.
just
So
vendor it into Reactor.
No, I mean what I'm saying is we can do that we can add a custom type module like spark.options.type that is like that you can then they can have callbacks and other stuff. I think the reason that sounds insane is because we have that with ash.type. But I mean, hell, we can support an ash.type being given as the type to a spark.options. It just it'll be kind of, a little fluid around the edges because we don't want to actually we can't depend on ash itself, but we can check like, does it have these callbacks? That's actually probably a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. That's
or unifying the type system outside of Ash, and bringing it into Ash that way.
No, I don't want to do that. It's a good idea, but I don't want to do it.
Fair enough.
It's like the work. Okay.
Yeah.
Another question: is there an advanced Ash book that is also in the works, or is it a possibility? Our team finds that it's usually when we get to doing the more complex stuff that we get stuck. No. That doesn't mean that I don't feel your pain, and we are working on docs are still a priority for us, and we make incremental improvements to those over time. And we do have somebody working on a sort of advanced actions, multi-step action type guide. And we want to write, more documentation like that. The best suggestion that I can give is that it's sad, but it's true, but I don't really know what's hard for people, right? Like our team doesn't really know what's hard for people. 'Cause, I mean, we invented the thing. Like we have some things like, I mean, it's just, so when you get to those things and then you inevitably, conquer them, you have some retrospective that like I can't ever get, which is what I didn't understand and the path to understanding it. And that's really important for documentation writing. So even if you just need to open an issue with a paragraph that says, I had a really hard time understanding this thing. It would be nice if this put in a couple sentences was somewhere in the docs that could help me. That is okay. Like we accept issues like that. I consider understandability to be its own axis of an issue. Like it doesn't have to be like an actual tech bug. And so, like you can, please just, I think that's the way that we can kind of move forward as a community is like, make sure that you document in some way those hiccups and how you got to the end of them.
Yeah, please. Okay, I see another question about, is there a way to see what code is generated? When writing C, I can tell the compiler to run the preprocessor and stop. In Ash, do I just use IEX and H? Well, I guess the great thing about Ash is that we don't generate very much code, or we try really hard to avoid it. So pretty much anywhere you see if you've got an Ash resource, there's an Ash resource info. If you've got an Ash domain, there's an Ash domain info. Those info modules provide the introspection for the underlying data structure. And so the only real code generation that happens, with the exception of a couple of special cases, which I'll talk about in a second, are the only real code generation is a thing called the Spark DSL config, which you can access on any Spark module, a resource, a domain, a reactor, or whatever. And that basically is just a huge map of the state of the DSL and any transformations that were applied to it. Yes, Spark DSL config. That's right. And really, the Ash is more like a virtual machine in some ways, in that it looks at, it introspects those data structures and then decides what actions to take. So it doesn't. So when you create an action, it's not creating a function called that is that action. It's more of a recipe. It's a list of instructions for what Ash should do when it's calling that action. There is a little bit of code gen, and that is anywhere you're using code interface. And sometimes extensions will do a bit of code gen because you can add it in a transformer, but often it's just for small things that are like, hey, delegate this function to this library or something like that. Like Reactor adds a run function, I think, to every Reactor module, but it really just says go and use reactor.run. So is there any other examples of code gen that I've missed?
I mean,
Zach?
there's some in extensions like Ash Oban generates
Yeah.
worker modules, which by the way was the wrong way to do it. It doesn't really matter right now,
Yep.
but it should have been done differently. But
Ash Ops does too.
yeah, Ash Ops will generate some code because it generates mixed tasks.
Yeah.
So, but I think the main lesson here is that the bulk of the resource itself is very little code generation. It's a data structure. I linked a blog post that I wrote a long time ago. It's not like it's not the best blog post of all time, but it talks about kind of the difference between certain kinds of macros. To me, right, this is my sort of how I think about it. But the Ash resource macros are generally configuration macros, so they're like they're just building a data structure that maps roughly to the configuration that you say, with some sort of post processing that you can view, you can look at it. So yeah, there are places where we generate code that, like James was talking about, and you can't easily just like view the code we generated, unfortunately.
Some places you can. Like when you use transformer.eval, that AST winds up in that data structure, which just makes it huge and hard to read, but that's where it is.
We should take it out.
Yeah.
I don't think that should
We
stay
should.
in here. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Good to know. I didn't really think about that. Well, then actually that means this, like, the AST of all of the Oban jobs is available in Spark DSL config. Oh my god. Okay. I gotta make a reminder. Oh my goodness. All right. Remove evals from Spark DSL config. I wonder if that has anything to do with the compile times of apps using Ash Oban. Fun.
Let's find out.
All right. Pictum says, how's the Ash book going? Notice you removed ACUI from Tunes, and then a few weeks later it was added to Phoenix. Yeah, that we got a good chuckle out of that. I have only briefly talked to Rebecca about that. I think it's worth considering for us to add it back in before we're done. I will also say a big part of the reason we removed it was because it wasn't until recently that Daisy added its standalone mode where it doesn't need Node.js to run. And that's also one of the major considerations for the Phoenix team considering using it, is it has that standalone mode, at least as far as I know. And now that it does have a standalone mode, people don't have to ask us, hey, why the hell do I need Node.js running or need Node.js as a part of this Elixir app, especially considering how a lot of people feel in the Elixir ecosystem about JavaScript. We just thought, well, let's just stick to regular Tailwind. But with all of that, with the Phoenix team switching to Daisy UI, we may just switch ourselves. We'll see. We're working on the last chapter of the book now, is a sort of status update there. Rebecca's working on the last chapter, and I'm solving for various UX experiences that she's finding. A lot of, I don't know if it's that obvious, or I don't know if people realize this or how much I've said it, but we're very much doing book-driven development. So in a lot of cases, as Rebecca works through a chapter, we're finding a bunch of little, it's like, oh, that could actually be a little bit better. Like, yes, that is how you do it, but it could be a little bit better. So we make a lot of improvements like that. I've only written, I've written a small percentage of the book compared to what Rebecca's written. The rest of my job has been smoothing out the rough edges that she's found. So very much book driven.
Yeah. A lot of it has been, I don't want to ask people to copy paste this huge chunk of code into their into their demo app.
Mhm.
How do we make this easier? And Zach goes, I'll make an igniter. But at the beginning, it was, I'll invent igniter.
Yeah, that is true. You're right. Actually, Igniter didn't exist. That was like, the book was a big part of it.
We
And
had an
then he,
idea and we talked about it a lot.
right,
But
right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, man, time flies. Um. Okay. That's the status of the book. I don't have a timeline on the last chapter. It's somehow Rebecca put it well recently. She said like it's 90% done and the last 90% is taking forever. Um, so there's a lot of sort of little things that are coming that we have to click into place, but it is proceeding well and making good progress. All right. Currently, Claude/Cursor, etc., are pretty bad at writing Ash code because it doesn't understand the APIs. Is there a Git repo you'd recommend that shows a lot of the patterns that we can feed as context? We have some example applications. The Tunes Git repo,
Tunes one.
for the book is public. You can check out. I think there's you would want to check out maybe like this will be better when the book is actually published. But right now, I think there's like an end of chapter 8 branch that you could check out that has a bunch of it is only code that we explicitly we wrote it for the book, so it contains only code that we consider idiomatic. With that said, there's the real world demo app. There's that demo app I just mentioned that's on Elixir forum. Something you can also do though that I would maybe suggest is feeding in the DSL docs as context. The DSL docs document literally every option for ash.resource, for example. So it's a lot of context. I don't know if you could do it. There's another thing you can do that's kind of new that I've been experimenting with. You can set up a HexDocs MCP server, so that it can look stuff up on HexDocs. Progress is being made on that in various other places, and I don't want to. I have a tool that does it, but I don't want to like pitch it because I don't think that the person who made it is necessarily looking for a bunch of people to go try it out. It was an experiment. But that's kind of maybe what I would suggest. Plus, the best way to make the AI better at Ash is to convince all of your friends to use it so that there's more Ash code out there for them to learn on their next round of training. So, All right, folks.
I want to make some gigantic company adopt it instead of and use it to re-platform their entire stack in a very public way.
Yes, that is another way to go about it. What I've found this to be super interesting. Like, I think we have this sort of issue in Elixir. Like, people don't really talk about using Elixir very much when they're like I have had this conversation, and it almost sounds like I'm making it up, I guess, because like it's a really convenient thing to say, but it really is true, which is there's a lot of people who see Elixir as a competitive edge, and they don't really want to tell the world, hey, look what you can do with Elixir. Now, that's not everybody. There's plenty of people doing case studies that are willing to talk about it. They want to talk about it, right? But I've had conversations with people who said, we have competitors. And those competitors, some of these were earlier stage companies. This one was. They're like, we don't really want them to know how much better Elixir is making our app. We don't really want to talk about it that much. So it is kind of an interesting thing. I'm not suggesting that we have that same problem with Ash, but I do think that in general, Elixir is more used than people realize, but it's just not talked about nearly as much. Yeah. All right. We're at the end. I think we're going to wrap it up here. I'm going to respect everybody's time, mostly my time, because I'm hungry. Thank you all for coming. This was a nice Ash office hours. I actually feel bad because I did not pre-warn the core team enough about this meeting. I got everything else right on preparation. We didn't have to jump meetings at the beginning. I had everything set up. Everything was great. The only thing I didn't do was tell any of the core team that this meeting was happening. So I'll have to get that better. I'll fix that next time. But yeah, thank you all for coming out. And if you have more questions, just hit us up on Discord or Elixir forum or whatever. Bye.
Bye.